Hello, Internet, and thank you very much for tuning into the Cloud Native FM podcast today. And this is your host for this show. My name is Saim Safdur, and I'm the host of Cloud Native Podcast. And in this episode, Isidora, maurer katanic, will join me, and she will be talk about her experience at MVP Summit 2023, things she liked most, best Scott memories, the story of finding new friends, memorable moments in the past and now in the MVP Summit, and what other MVP has in common, and story of newly famous Star War hoodie, and the tour of Microsoft headquarters, new profile picture, and a lot more. And Thomas will help us know a lot latest and greatest from Azure, Kubernetes, developer advocacy, and a lot other stuff. So without any further delay, let's go straight to our guest, Isidora and Thomas. Thank you very much joining us today. So I will start with Isidora. So ladies first.
Hi, Saeem. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invite to come to your podcast. I know it's long overdue. You wanted this for a long time, so I'm happy we finally managed to be here. Yeah, it's a super honor to be on your show. And hi, everybody on the internet, as you nicely said at the start. And yeah, let's head over to my neighbor.
Yes.
Next door.
Yeah, it's
Over
thank
to
you
you,
very much
Thomas.
first of all, for having us today in the show. Yeah, we're not roomies anymore. We now have separate offices, but Isidore is like 10 steps away. So always excited. I think it's the first time, I'm not sure, is it the first time we've ever been on a podcast like this together?
This is the absolute first time, also the last time, but no, it's a premiere on Saeem's show that we are doing a podcast together.
Yes, absolutely. I managed to do it first time and I managed to do it again in the future as well. Because in that way you can spend time together. It's very difficult. Both are actually touring the whole world, and I want you to spend time together as well. So let me go to, because we have prepared some slide for today's show, and Isidora will walk us through of those slides. So we will be talking about MVP Summit 2023, and let's talk about this one first. Isidora, over to you.
Curious to see what you have in a store. I currently don't see a slide yet.
Oh, I hope it will be there. It's basically a newly Star Wars hoodie.
So it's still traveling the internet to pop up on my screen. Do you see it, Tom?
No, I also can't see it right now.
Oh, let me share again. Let me share again once again. I remove it and back again. So basically, I'm talking about the Star Wars hoodie, and actually, you wear it
This one.
now. Yes.
Maybe that's even better than on a slide. So as we had discussed earlier, it is May the 4th. It's May the 4th be with you. It's Star Wars Day. So, of course, even though it's 25 degrees outside, it's a super hot day. I put on this hoodie especially for you.
Yes, absolutely.
25 degrees is a super hot day. Really? That's how we define a super hot
That's
day.
the guy with the grandpa hat on his head. Are you cold?
Oh, yes. Yes, 25 is not considered to be with the places where we live, where we can have 36, 37 in May
Exactly.
or
Yeah,
June
it's
time.
very hot.
But definitely we are experiencing a rainy season in here and started early in the geography where I'm living. But tell us about where this idea come from, this hoodie. How you actually
Well,
find this? Because
the hoodie I have for a while, but I think the one you wanted to show is the Darth Vader costume, which I
is
wore
it
a few weeks ago. You pulled up the picture from my Twitter. Yeah, so the story behind that, it was actually some sort of carnival that we have going on here in our area. And there was a children's gathering in our village, and I thought it would be cool if Emilia would go dressed as Baby Yoda, and I would go as Darth Vader. Yeah, it's a pity the slide doesn't pop up to share the picture. Maybe you want to recheck again.
Oh yes, I think it's getting. But we get to talk. I will fix this. Let me fix this again quickly. So yes, but I think that is getting very much hit. I believe for the MVP Summit 2023, if there's a reminder, is what happens there that the StarWars hoodie will be in the minds of the people. Like there's a thing called StarWars hoodie come into the into the picture. So that is actually a new thing. But I really like it. It's a new. It's a new hoodie. But and you tell us. So next thing, May the 4th right now, as of today. So is it, do have you have any May the 4th memories for the traveling you had done in the past? Or let's say the big thing that is still remembering as of today?
Maybe you, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah, just throw it at me because I know. No, but yeah, so I think not necessarily made it for, but like there is a that's a nice
Now I
one.
see it.
Yeah. No, I think last time, like one thing I have memories on traveling, usually during that time frame, there were a lot of like conferences. I remember, I think there was a Ignite at one point in time during that time, and I also know that, for example, MMS, like the Midwest Management Summit, is during that time as well. So back in the days when there was still a lot of traveling going on for us, I remember going at these places. So yeah, beginning of May is always a good time, but also crazy busy time.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And now, Siddhar, I hope you can see the screen, the slides now. Can you let us know where you are in this picture? Which place is this?
Yeah, so this picture is taken in Prague. It was during a previous Experts Live Europe conference that we held in Prague. And I read somewhere that there was an R2D2 sort of statue hidden in a park. And I was like, I need to find it. And I remember I actually went there on my own. Had to ask somebody else who was walking the dog to take a photo. But it was like hidden in a park. You really had to like climb a little hill, go behind the trees, and there it was. There I found it, and yeah. So I thought, let's pull it up this morning on the Experts Live Europe page, because of course we're gonna have IT professionals from around Europe coming to Prague this September. So it would be cool, of course, to invite people to take selfies there and to go check it out.
And who has taken this picture? Who is actually below? Is actually who's taking this picture?
It was somebody who was walking their dog, and I was like, sorry, could you quickly take a photo?
Absolutely, absolutely. And now tell us about the new profile picture of yours, your Microsoft headquarter tour, and key takeaways for the Microsoft Summit. You write a blog post as well. Now let us know what's your favorite moment from this MVP Summit.
Yeah, so first of all, indeed, the new picture, it was taken in front of, I hope I say the building number right, otherwise Tom, correct me, building number 92. That's where the Microsoft store is. I see Tom looking like I'm not sure. I think it's building number 92, and there they have this big famous Microsoft sign, which is actually when you go to the headquarters, it's the number one thing you have to do. You have to go there, take your picture, post and share it online. So here, one of my good friends, Maarten Goed, who's also MVP and regional director, he took this photo of me, which of course, yeah, you found on Twitter. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And all of this. And now tell us about, there are new conferencing being coming up.
You quickly want to go back that we go through some of the key takeaways ahead from the summit?
Yes, absolutely. Why not? I'm going there. Can you see them?
Well, you put them there, so I assumed you wanted to discuss a few of them. Yeah, we'll of course not go through every aspect. I mean, I wrote a blog post with the idea of any first timer like myself. For me, it was the first time I was going to the summit. It was the first time I was going to the headquarters. So of course, a lot of it is very overwhelming. So I wrote top 10 of my key takeaways of attending the summit for the first time. And if I would look at the list, well, I would first say check out the blog, But if there's something I would want to highlight, which I think is was very cool, I think exploring the campus. That's something which luckily I had a few hours in between sessions and happy hours and gatherings to meet with one of our great friends, Dave Kurt. He used to live in Switzerland, but he moved to Seattle to work for Microsoft Corp. And he has the magical blue badge, which got me to places where I could not go, of course, if I would not have access. Yeah, I love the Microsoft tree houses. I think that was very special. It's like really like very cute wooden houses, trees, nature. I think it's a great spot to meet. So yeah, if you have the opportunity to travel to the campus, make sure you check out the tree houses. If you don't have somebody with the blue badge, you can always walk around on the outside and see how they look like.
Yeah, they're not so spectacular from the inside, to be honest. It's like, and I remember I've been there a couple of times in these tree houses. They're also pretty cold. Like when it's cold out, there's no heating. Like usually,
Oh, yeah.
you have a small heater you can turn on, but obviously we don't want to waste energy there, so they're not actually heated. So I remember like when I was there, it was super cold. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
How did you like the sessions? Like, how did you like the actual content which was presented? I mean, that for me is always like number one is like, hey, I want to learn what's coming. I know you cannot talk what they actually said because of the NDAs, but how did you like how that worked?
So I cannot say anything, but no. Well, I mean, it's something that I also put in my blog. What I was so surprised about is how open the product groups are, how they really answer your questions, how they share information, which is really NDA. And yeah, I thought the setup of that was really cool. It really felt like, you know, the difference when you see like, I don't know, like a big keynote, Scott Guthrie comes on stage, you feel like there's this big distance. There's no way you will be able to talk to him. There's thousands of people attending the keynote. And here at the summit, like, when he was finished with his keynote, he stepped off the stage towards us, like to really talk to us, to have a chat with us, to be open for questions, for this great picture you see on screen, which was on purpose that I wore the red dress that day, knowing Scott is going to do the keynote to color coordinate. No, but I loved how open they were, really talking to us MVPs and answering our questions and staying around after their sessions to talk to us.
I mean, all the MVPs and regional leads, etc. I mean, they all have deserved it, right? Those are all subject matter experts for Microsoft, and obviously they all have an NDA with us, so we can actually talk with you without you being able to actually share that information right out to the outside world, because some of it is so early, it's just things we're thinking about. But what I realized is, like, usually what we think about, and that was also the work we did with the MVPs, is to learn from it, right? That's why they're also so close, is because we are super happy to have the MVPs to actually tell us the good and the bad, right? Like to tell us, what do you think? What's your opinion? Because you're working with this technology day in, day out, you know a lot about it. So that's where I think we want to definitely know from the MVPs, like what they think about. So that's also, you cannot just do a one-way communication, right? It's like there has to be this conversation, and that's why this is happening. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the Microsoft had done a wonderful job of building the community. And I think now these communities are popping up. I believe way back in 2010, I'm thinking all the time why there is a lot of content about Microsoft technologies compared to the others. And then I think about they have programs that's called MVPs, and they encouraging and they actually appreciating the people from outside of Microsoft, helping other people to be actually efficient while teaching and educating about Microsoft stuff. So I think now this stuff is actually popping up. But I do call a point up here. There are two websites. One is Thomas More website, and one is Isidora. Which one is better?
Isidora, 100%.
Which one is what? Sorry? Better?
Yes,
Yes.
better. Yes, of
Oh,
course.
no, well, definitely Tom's. Definitely Tom's. I mean, he's super active with blogging since ever I know him and before. I've been a bit quiet on the blogging side, but I think you should definitely go to Tom's website for a lot of tips in community and technical content and so on.
Yes, absolutely. But Thomas' website is so much content in there. Is Thomas' website is like a cloud native landscape. There is so
Yeah, it's I always say it's kind of like a weird brain dump coming out of my head, right? So I usually just blog about things I'm interested in terms of technology, right? It's like most of the time it's about Microsoft Azure, about cloud, about Windows Server, PowerShell. But I also blog about if I get a new notebook, right? If there's a new Surface or something like that, I write my experience about it because I really appreciate when others do the same thing, right? When they share their knowledge and when they share their experience with the rest of the world, I find that always the best thing. And so I'm like, well, if I write things down for myself, that's one thing, but I also write it down and share it with others, right? And so that's how this usually works. And I love like what Isidora does on her blog does really well is like sharing personal experiences, right? Like how she thinks about these things, like how her experience was at the MVP summit, for example. You had some other great blogs on what is it, like how to go to Ignite or something like that, or like how to attend a conference and some things like that. I don't know exactly anymore what it was, but like those are like very, very good tips usually for people. But you look very skeptical. Like, did I? Is that not what you wrote? Like, you know
Me?
what I mean? Yes, that's what you wrote
I,
about,
I don't
right?
know which blog post you're referring to, but yeah, I often write indeed about attending conferences or my experiences there rather than technical topics that you have knowledge about.
yes, absolutely. And the question for the Isidora, like how many time in a day or a week you go to the Thomas Maurer website?
So actually, to be honest, at the very beginning, often because I would help sometimes spot mistakes and then be like, Tom, there's a spelling error here, or there's a I don't know, like. And now, yeah, I would say maybe 6 times per day I'm reading every. No, just kidding. It depends. I think that's the best answer I can give here.
I was hoping it's your startup page, like first thing you do. Like,
It's my home screen, yeah, when I open my browser.
Yes, I think that's the advantage of being a person. The partner can help you. That's the advantage of a tech partner because you can have tester in your team, and might you have something you can end up lifting like how the things work. So otherwise Thomas has to do this activity of unit testing while deploying writing his stuff as well, and it's take a lot of the time. And Thomas being busy person, he don't have much time for the unit testing. I know. So
yeah, no, look, I'm like everyone has different skills, right? And for me, I'm not very good in spotting mistakes and all that and making it super clean. And so having like Isidora jumping in and helping me, not just with like typos and things like, but also telling me, hey, might be something. How did you mean that? How like this could be better, right? So she gives me some very good perspectives on my content. I hope I do the same on hers, but yeah, no, it's definitely helpful. Like I also can learn a lot from her in terms of like, hey, what do you think if I write about this? Is that helpful, or should I do something different? So always good to talk about things. Yes.
next question, like Isidora will tell us there is new stuff happening in Microsoft all the time. And where are you traveling again? I believe there's traveling coming up.
So yeah, I actually even missed a conference in this list, which is coming up in May. So even before I go to Portugal, it's actually going to be the Global Azure conference in Switzerland. It's in Bern next week. to be honest, all these events you see in this list are community driven. So they're really done by fellow MVPs or RDs or other community champions that are hosting events. So yeah, I'm very excited. Like I said, Global Azure Switzerland. I'll be attending next week. That's easy. That's like 1 hour by train. Easy to manage. Then right after, the day after, I will fly to Portugal for the Global Azure there, which is going to be on Saturday. Very excited about that. I've never been to Lisbon. It's going to be my first time. So I hope I also get to see a bit of the city. Then after that, we're going to have the European Collab Summit in Germany. That's also really a super cool community-driven conference I'm looking forward to. And actually, before that one even ends, I need to continue to the Netherlands for Experts Live, Netherlands happening there, which is also a community conference where I've been going to for many, many years. I know the team behind it, organizing. They do such a great job every year to bring the community together with over 1,000 attendees. So yeah, it's quite a packed, busy schedule for May, but I'm very, very excited for it.
Yes, absolutely. And that is actually the traveling because of the Azure and the community building. And is there a traveling plan with Thomas and Emilia?
No. No. Well, we actually had during the Collab Summit, I would travel to Germany and the Netherlands, and Thomas would stay in Switzerland with Emilia. But then he got invited to speak at VeeamON in Miami in US. So then it was like, all right, who's gonna take Emilia? So in the end, she will come. She will come with me. So that will be a joint travel I will do together with Emilia. But Tom will be going to VeeamON in the United States.
Well, we have some summer vacation coming up where we are 3 of us are together. So that's where we're looking for forward to this summer.
Oh yes, absolutely. That's much needed. And now, I think, can you tell us about, because might be there are some people are very new to Expert Live Europe, what it is, what this program is all about, and plus what this tweet is all about.
Yeah, so that's a tweet from this morning. But first of all, so yeah, Experts Live Europe, it's a community conference. It's fully focused on everything around Microsoft Cloud, data center, security, modern workplace technologies. It's a 3-day conference happening on September 18th till 20th in Prague. It starts with the pre-day, which is going to be deep dive workshops, which will be delivered partly by Microsoft, partly by Microsoft MVPs. Followed by 2 days with more than 50 technical breakout sessions presented by speakers from all over Europe, but even from the United States and from Australia. And I'm part of the organization, so I'm very excited. Of course, it's something I'm working on every day in the evening, in free time, during the day, weekends. A conference organizing never sleeps. And so this list you see today, so per tradition, we always do our monthly country rundown. We share the where the top registrations are coming from. And for this month, number 1 leading is Norway, followed by Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, and Czech Republic. So yeah, it's a list which is always changing, and it's funny to see closer to the conference how numbers really can completely change again in countries. So yeah, we'll be sharing the next one in June again.
Yes, absolutely. I think that yesterday the CNCF is actually generate a report how much they attendance from the different countries, and Germany is there as well. I think these people liked conferences and attending. I think there's been culture developing up in some of the countries about joining the conference.
When I look at statistics from all previous years, we always had Germany in the top 3, sometimes even number 1. So it's great to see that we have a delegation loyal coming back every year from Germany.
Yes, absolutely. And now it's time for Thomas to let us know how to become a Microsoft MVP. Over to you, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you very much. So obviously with all that MVP talk going on, and especially during the summit, like the MVP sharing all these great benefits to actually talk to the product group, visiting the campus and things like that. There's a lot of question how you actually become an MVP. And I wrote a blog post, as you can see, where I go into detail into this. But I want to just give you a little bit of like my thoughts about it, like a really quick summary, like the most important 2 snippets, I think. The first one is, don't necessarily do it to just become a Microsoft MVP, right? That's what I also hear from other MVPs who are saying the same thing. When I started doing community activities, it was not becoming an MVP. It was, I started it because I want to be part of the community. I want to share my knowledge. I want to give something back. And most importantly, I want to help others, right? And by the way, like that's probably also what, when you think about it, that is always something really satisfying when you can help others, right? So like if you know you did something which helped someone else, that's a great feeling, right? So again, important is don't focus too much on the MVP stuff. Focus really on delivering stuff which is helping others. And that said, I also get asked often, like, what do you need to create and things like that. I would say just create what makes sense for you, what you really like to do. If you'd like to do videos, if you do like to do podcasts, if you do like blogs, if you do help in forums, if you help on social media, if you do help creating conferences, for example, user groups and so on, those are all great things, right? But you don't have to do them all. You really should like what you enjoy the most. I think that is what I also always say. And then the last, but probably the most important one is, I often get like people who are super motivated to become an MVP, and then they start out pushing like blog posts every day, and then after 2-3 weeks they basically suddenly stop, right? And they like think, okay, well that was not. So I always tell people, hey, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? So you will need to have consistency, you will need to have patience, you will do all the work over time, right? You don't need to push every day a blog post or a video. I mean, you can do that if you have the time and the power to do it, the energy. But think about that. You probably can create a consistent schedule, right? That you can do one item of content, like one video a week or one blog post a week, and keep that on over a year, for example. Like that is the important part, right? I think that is a great thing to do. And then make sure that people actually find you, right? So connect with other MVPs on social media, connect with other people in the community, not just limit to MVPs, but share their stuff, share your stuff, so that actually the great things you create, that they become visible. And then at one point, a Microsoft MVP or a Microsoft employee will recognize you for what you have done, and then can go out to actually nominate you for the work you have done. And that's like a formal process during a forum where you then also enter like all the things you have done. And then in Microsoft, you have the Microsoft product group and the MVP teams who actually look at this and then decide if that's something you should get awarded with. So that's very, very quickly on how to become an MVP. But again, I encourage you to read the full blog post, because that covers so much, like what I just said, just a little bit nicer outlined, and with some more background on it.
Yes, absolutely. I do encourage as well, because Thomas is a website, has some wonderful content, community-oriented, latest and greatest on the Azure. But I believe Isidora might have to leave. But Isidora, have ever Thomas help you creating some slides or help you while you're speaking at the conferences in the past? Just a few words on it.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. He has definitely been a big ally helping out. Of course, he has a couple of years of more experience in the community than I have. So yeah, I'm thankful for the things which he has taught me.
I mean, to be honest,
absolutely. And Isidora,
to be fair, there's only like
so much
advice I can give you from experience, but it's incredible, like the eye of details and the excitement. Like when I see a session of Isidora, it's just like, I wish sometimes I would have the energy to put all that in. So I'm always like, it's always motivating for me to see how she does, right? It's like, okay, well, if she does that, great. I need to also do better than I do right now.
It's not a sprint, Tom. It's a marathon.
Yes,
So
absolutely,
speaking of
absolutely.
sprinting and racing, that was a very cool experience that you see there on the left image, me on the quad, somewhere in the woods in Washington. That was actually on the last day before heading back home from the MVP summit. It was perfect. I spent the weekend with my dear friend Holly Lehman. She took me out and about, and that was very cool to drive the quad through the forest. And the image on the right, that's actually on the campus taken in the Microsoft Garage, which is also a really cool building to explore. Yeah, and indeed, looking at the time, as you already mentioned, I have approximately 2 minutes. Then I will have to run out to pick up our little one from
Now,
daycare.
oh yes, absolutely. But before you leave, final few items. I need these chocolates.
Yeah, I brought lots of this. This was the leftover on the last day, but I brought almost the whole suitcase full of chocolates and goodies to the summit. Yeah, I mean, you can send me your address. I can send you some chocolates, or come to one of the conferences in Europe, and I will bring it for you.
Yes, absolutely. I believe there is another person called Nuno Ducarmo from Switzerland. He also brings some chocolates on KubeCon as well. It's a chocolatey season. I hope you saw out the Twitter as well. So before you leave, your final fight, have you find new friends in the
Yeah, that was
later of
really,
you?
really nice of the MVP Summit. So a lot of people you meet them on Twitter, you see them on LinkedIn, you know they're speaking at conferences, you know their blog, you follow them, and suddenly you meet them in person. Next to me sitting, for example, you see Azure. So I've been following her for a long time. She's such a beautiful, great human being, and I finally got the opportunity to meet her in person. But not just Azure, also many, many other people, many other MVPs. You get to meet in person, so that was really valuable for me to also spend that social time next to all the sessions during the summit.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. I hope we go. If you plan, you can leave now, but we discuss
Yeah, I
more
need to
technical
jump
stuff.
out because mother duty calls. That's part of it when we're doing something together. One of us needs to jump out. As Tom brought her to the daycare this morning, it's my turn now to go pick her up. So I will let you guys talk about Kubernetes, Azure, about the more technical stuff. And
Yes,
thank you
absolutely.
again, James, so much for having me part of your show. And I wish you boys a great rest of the afternoon. And everybody else, of course, who's watching or listening online. Hope to see you soon somewhere.
Thank you, Isidora. We will be back again. We'll try to do again this show as well. But thank you very much for premiere
Take
with
care.
Thomas' show. Bye bye. But
Bye.
Thomas, now it's me and you, and time to do some Azure AKS leveling up. So let me know, have you, I believe Azure done some co-located event at the KubeCon. What's new coming up in the Azure? Specifically, I believe Azure is targeting around GitOps sync. They have Flux sports already built in. And some of the cloud native tech you see is recently popping up. Microsoft has a open source tool called Kata, one of my favorite tool for auto scaling. But your time now coming up, so let me know all the latest and greatest from Azure, AKS, and what you recently saw. What is actually on the horizon?
So there's obviously a ton of awesome improvements coming to our Azure Kubernetes service in Azure. But also, if you have lately paid attention to, we also announced something called Azure Kubernetes Service Hybrid Deployment Options. So there's obviously, again, a ton of improvements around the Kubernetes service itself, if, like you mentioned, Kata and others. As well as also like better support for Windows containers and so on. But one thing I want to talk about, I think, which is very exciting, because you also mentioned GitOps, the GitOps integration, which is a great way of doing that. It's not just about, again, running Kubernetes in Azure as AKS, right? What our customers were telling us is, hey, we also have our on-premises locations, or edge locations, like like let's put it like factories or retail stores, branch offices, but also their own data centers where they want to run our like a Kubernetes service, right? And because they are running, for example, the AKS in Azure as a managed service, they also would like to run the same thing with the same control plane experience, with the same management experience, with the great as a service experience, right? I could call it the as a service experience on premises. And that is where Azure or AKS hybrid deployment options come in, where you can basically deploy it online, like on premises. There's different ways of doing that. You can, for example, deploy it on Windows Server. You can deploy it on Azure Stack HCI, or you can also use something called AKS Edge Essentials and run that on like Windows IoT or Windows 10 or Windows 11. So there are different options there as well. So you really have, like, depending on what you need to do, you have different options and different deployment modes. But the great thing is that this is not just a managed Kubernetes cluster. For example, like maining that, we, for example, ship updates every month. We're not just updating the control plane of the Kubernetes cluster. We also update the worker nodes of the Kubernetes cluster, right? So if you ever dealt with that, like that can be a pain to do, but we really deliver it as a service. And we are using for that our internal Microsoft Linux distribution, which we also run, which we also announced to be available in Azure as well. And so there is definitely some stuff which we benefit. But another great benefit is, as I mentioned, it's connected to Azure, right? So if you're using the Azure control plane, for example, you use Azure Monitor for your Kubernetes cluster in Azure. You can also use that now for your Kubernetes cluster on premises. You can use things like managed identities, Key Vault integration, and all that great stuff. And you, as you mentioned, GitOps is also a way of integrating GitOps in your Kubernetes cluster running in AKS in Azure, but also on the hybrid side, right? So I just worked with a customer, has like, I don't know the exact number, but let's say around 500 different locations where they run a Kubernetes cluster running different applications. And one of the challenges they have, like even before they run Kubernetes, is that how do you update the application running there? How do you make sure that you have the latest version? And so with the GitOps integration, it makes it super easy for them to store the application in a Git repo with all the information. And then with the Azure Arc agent from that Kubernetes cluster, it checks if there is a newer version of this application available. And if it is, it automatically goes out and deploys that application. So they can, in theory, they could go out and update all their 500 locations in a couple of seconds and minutes, right? Now, obviously, it's probably not what you want to do. You want to go a little bit staged, right? You want to do like the first 50 locations, the other 50 locations. But there is definitely a lot of interesting things there in that space. And again, we see a huge interest in especially AKS hybrid deployment options.
Yes, absolutely. That's make a lot of. I see right now we have like as we mentioned, like if you look at the KubeCon, we see the Flux integration with Azure is in place. Now you can auto scale, and auto scaling is very, very effectively HPA, VPA is already been done using Kata. You can add Prometheus integration. So these are all the hype coming up. So Thomas, if you look at the internet, there is a platform engineering is being hitting everybody's mind. So is your Azure customers and the community is talking about the same thing within their customers, within their community, how they look at this domain that's new popping up? Like where you look at the platform engineering is a necessity. Is why this everybody is now speaking about this stuff. Is it a need right now, or is it just a hype?
So yes, so this is actually a very interesting thing, right? I mean, there are many, many terms for the work people do, especially when it comes to cloud computing. We have SRE, we have DevOps, we have platform engineering, We have more traditional names like IT pros and admins and so on, right? So there's a ton of this different wording and processes and methodologies, if you will, and like what they think. At the end, there's also then the developer side as well, right? So we have this ops story, I should say, where again I would count in SRE, DevOps scenarios, as well as platform engineering and many others, kind of like the ops segment. Like I'm not necessarily saying we should call it ops, but like we have this ops spectrum. And then on the other side, we have the dev spectrum. And the dev spectrum is really all usually about writing code, creating the application, right? There are obviously devs who also need to build a platform, like spin up sometimes their own Kubernetes clusters. But I don't think that's the main scenario for developers, right? Very often you have a couple of people, you have a team which does the platform engineering, which makes sure that you have a Kubernetes cluster, you have a cloud environment, you have infrastructure, storage. And meaning infrastructure doesn't mean necessarily just physical servers. This also means like, again, networking in place, for example, like who configures the firewalls, who can make sure that things are secure, all these things coming together so that then developers can write the applications and then they get automatically deployed. So thinking about like GitOps is actually a great example, right? So if like the platform engineering team, let's call it the platform or engineering team or ops team, they spin up the Azure environment. And again, I mean, obviously GitOps is not like tied to Azure alone, right? There's others which can do, but let's take it as the Azure example. They can spin up that environment. They make sure that the Kubernetes clusters are running, and they make sure that how the applications get published, how they are is secure, that there's some local answers, etc., deployed in that, and maybe use some publishing rules and things like that. And then you have the developers. They just check in the code. They write the great application, and they check in the code into a Git repo. And then the platform engineering team basically says, okay, this is the automatic process. If someone approves the code, we can run it in our dev environment. And then if we say, yes, that works, we can then go on and like do it in our integration environment, and then at the end, all in production, right? So this is nice segregation way of like playing together to make sure that one team can do this and the other team can do that. Now, are the lines blurring between those two groups? Absolutely, right? There's like, obviously, as I mentioned, there's devs setting up their Kubernetes clusters as well. There's also obviously ops or platform engineers writing code or scripts and optimizing things. So there's definitely it's a blurry line to go through, in my opinion. But it's definitely something we need as well, right? Very often we talk about the developers, we talk about how to write code, how to publish the application, but obviously someone needs to provide all that. And that is obviously done by, let's say, again, the ops team or the platform engineering team or the SRE team and things like that. And then obviously also not just providing it, but then also making sure it keeps on running, right? That's also something which we should not forget about.
Yes, absolutely. Totally true. I think if you just look at the Kubernetes clusters, if you just install Kubernetes and then you deploy app on top of it, this app is not accessible from the outside world. What developer has to do is install Ingress controller, and he needs to understand how the Ingress works on top of it. Then thing like he need to install GitOps. That's cool, you're doing it. I know GitOps, I am very expert in it, I like GitOps, but to be honest with you, if you do it multiple time, this becomes a toil, and toil nobody like it. It's a repeatable task. Then you install service mesh. Oh, you are expert of service mesh, I really like service mesh, I don't live without it. That can be happen, but remember, if you do it 3 times, you might think, why I'm doing this. So I think there's a necessity of time. Forget about Kubernetes, service meshes, GitOps. Think about business, because your job is to deploy app that generates a business or revenue for your company. And currently, is not. People are just pushing, doing more of the time in the configuring of the infrastructure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and you hit absolutely. So there's a great point of this, and I think in cloud computing in general, I think that's absolutely true. So first point you made, and that I like very much, is like think about the business, right? We're not doing things just because it's fun. We're doing things because they help the business, right? We're writing the app for some end user who is using that, or for our backend systems. So that is very, very important to think about that. And then the other thing which I realize is that, like back in the days, all in the old times, right? You had some infrastructure team, and like there were maybe a team which was focused on networking. There was a team focused on storage. There was a team focused on the hypervisor, for example, and that did work probably well back in the days. Even then, there were challenges, but in the cloud, you need to understand a little bit more, right? You cannot just say, okay, I only care about this and I don't care about that. Now, that said, you cannot do everything because you're not going to be, as you just mentioned, you're not going to be efficient, right? I probably need, as you said, like I need to understand how these things work, but it's probably not my job to every time write the code, set up Kubernetes, set up GitOps, make sure that networking is correct, make sure that the firewall is correct. That's maybe not the part, right? I probably need to understand how kind of like this works, just to like on a high level. But then there's one person, again, the developer, who's focusing then writing on the code, right? And then there's the platform engineering team, which maybe also have different experts, right? Some of them are experts in setting up Kubernetes. Some of them are experts in terms of monitoring things. Some of them are security experts. And so you still like need to have these different types of like focuses, where you have a focus and so on, where that you can be efficient and productive, right? Again, it's good to understand like how everything works together, but it's not efficient if one person does it all, I believe. Like, I mean, there are very few at one point that can do it, and again, the efficiency is probably not the best, right? So absolutely, you're absolutely right, is like you need to have some experts on certain topics, but again, I cannot, like, that's my point also of view, is like, if I'm the networking expert, I cannot say I don't care about anything else, right? I probably need to understand a little bit how Kubernetes works. I need to understand how the firewalling stuff works. I need to understand how are these apps, how is this app working together with the rest of the business applications that I can set things up, right? And then I need to understand, like, okay, network needs to somehow integrate into storage, for example. So I need to know this, right? So it's a very interesting perspective, but there's two extremes which are probably not good. One is I do everything, and the other one is I do only one thing. So I think we need to find a little bit of a middle ground where you have the understanding, like a high level understanding about a lot of things going on, but then focus on one or two things you're actually doing.
Yes,
do you
absolutely.
see that the same way, or do you have other experiences there?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely dead simple. You're absolutely right. Because if you look at you talk about the virtual machine era. I think some of the company was that time has a wonderful engineers who can understand how the virtual machine work, how the networking work inside the virtual machine, and how the operating system get virtualizes inside that virtual machine box. What they end up doing is they creating a giant virtual machine, and the things they actually manage all of the virtual machines for a lot of the customer or groups throughout the world. What end up happening is they think like it's cost us a lot of money. Like we can do it, but where do they bring this money to come from? And then they start doing another thing. They look at the crowd that has a huge business model, a huge virtual machine. Let them know they don't know how to operate virtual machines. Let them find out, we can help them out how to manage and operate the virtual machine. That's same happening in the Kubernetes world. People trying to solve the business problem that actually Kubernetes solve, that they end up implementing their own like a little own local machine or local setup, and that local setup does wonderful things, and then they open source it and the rest of the world really like about it. And then they
Mhm.
might think like, do I sell the problem I'm actually solving, or do I sell the thing I able to solve the problem for? So that is actually everybody got confused. And when you have the marketing team is actually confused, like, do I portray this information or that information? It's end up creating the chaos of it. And luckily, I think right now the platform engineering or the developer service focus came in into the rescue of the developer because they are the most affected from all these waves. They have to learn containers. They have to understand virtual machine works. They have to understand how the Kubernetes ingress controller works. They have to understand how deployment replica set work. They have to understand how the networking, the CNI works, how to install service meshes, how to install GitOps. And remember, this is a huge, huge wave. And just to install a tiny WordPress application after that, this is so weird, to be honest. I think we live in the time. And remember, if the Kubernetes eventually pop up in 2005 or 2010, where people don't write a blog post, when people don't have a community, when we don't have conferences, and when we don't have podcasters, and we don't have experts, easily approachable person like Thomas Morton on the internet who can join us and communicate it. Remember, this IT gone nowhere, to be honest. But the reason
Yeah.
why I think that these things are actually working is because of the community sport and all these kind of activity. And before I let you know at the final toss, because I ask you keep on asking these questions again and again. We look at the Microsoft Docs. These are wonderfully curated as compared to the other vendors and other communities. We look at the Microsoft, a much broader community as compared to the others. If we look at the Microsoft employees, easily approachable as compared to the others. What do you think, like how this culture being developed for the smaller companies who just starting like a year ago, how they can develop this culture within their organization, what step they needed to be taken?
I think like smaller companies already kind of automatically get that kind of like approach. If you look at startups, they very often are this. Now, at the end, it comes all the way to like what culture do you have in your company and what employees do you hire, right? Like that is kind of like the important part, because at one point you can try to create the culture, but it's also important that you have the right employees, because the employees are generating the culture the company has, right? And I always say, like, hey, Microsoft is probably the biggest and oldest startup in the world, because we have obviously the resources and especially super smart people. I mean, others have that too, but we have very smart people, and we let them do certain things and make decisions by themselves as well. Like that is something where I feel like a lot of great products are actually coming from that, right? So as when I talk to companies, or when I get asked like what can I do for my employees, at the end, I mean, it's hard to. We all have enough to do, right? That I do acknowledge that, but it's important if you want to help your employees do the job better. If you want to help your employees to be long term in your company, you need to get them room that they can develop, right? And you obviously also need to have the right employees who actually want that. So you need to give them time to learn new technologies. You need to support them doing that, and maybe also support them being part of the community, right? Meaning, with supporting that, at the end they need to do the work, but you probably give them some like okay that they can actually write about the things they're doing, that they actually can be part of, like, let's say Microsoft programs, right, where they can like partner with us as a company, for example, to get the latest information as well. At the end, again, it's giving the right people the freedom they need. I think that is my point there, so that they can do what they like and the way they can do it as best as possible. Because it's really a downward spiral if you have a person who is always buried in work and has no time to learn something new and just needs to keep on doing the same thing over and over again. Let's help that person to figure out how can we change that work to probably like let's say, automate it or like split it up, that this person also has some extra time to work on some new projects, right? I'm not saying you need to like give them absolute free time so they can learn something. I would say give them new projects to do, right? Give them something new where they are responsible for, and by basically learning by doing, right? That's often how it happens. And in some cases, it's good to do a course. In some, it's good to invest in certifications, and give them some time for that. But give them, like, that was always good for me, right? I always try to get the most interesting projects to do in a company, right? Even though it's challenging, and obviously I need to put in a lot of time and investment to learn about these things. But it really helps me, or helped me, especially in the past and also now. If you jump on these things, you learn so much new things. Your job gets more excited, and also for the long term, it's obviously a benefit for the company if you have people who just automatically learn the new stuff because they are interested in it, right? So I hope that makes sense. I know I said a lot of things, but I have some very strong feelings about how companies and employees can work together, to make sure that they are going forward, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And those are, I think those are the much needed thought, and everybody's searching for currently right now. But I believe there are startups coming up. They have developer advocate from the startups. There are the startups who actually have developer relations from the very initial state of the company. This means there are people, and the company's co-founder is actually looking at this ecosystem as an education. It's not just promoting your own stuff, it's providing the education that let them know why your solution is important for their business. And if you are doing these kind of activities, you are in a good shape. And if you don't do that, don't doing this kind of activity, or still in the Kubernetes, wow, I am confused why you're not doing these kind of things. That's the way to tell it. So, Thomas, I believe so. Final wind up for this discussion. I really enjoy talking with you every time we connect, because I learn a lot of the cool things from you. And these words actually save into my memories. And wherever I go, I will use those words to help people know why these words are very important for your business. So I really like in your blog post or your website, we have some kind of a visual guide for the Azure Cloud Native technologies. Like we have Kada, Prometheus, Grafana, service meshes, GitOps. I believe it's solid to have. If I go to the Thomas website, Thomas will let me know. Like if I am in this condition, I can use Kada, then I use Prometheus and Grafana. If I'm in this position, I can use GitOps with Flex. So some guides, because cloud native stuff is way too complicated than else of the world. So I definitely want to have this in your website. I believe you are working on some of the cool stuff as well. And I think I want those to be secret, because I want those surprises to be coming up in the next. Final thoughts. Are you traveling this week? Where are you actually going? I know Microsoft Ignite and Build is, I believe, later, or Ignite is later, but these two are coming up. Where people can find you?
That's awesome. So yeah, later in May, we have Microsoft Build. Unfortunately, I won't be there in person, but I will present in a online learn session. So at least we can talk online and chat and have a conversation there as well. Microsoft Ignite will be later, I guess, this year at one point. I don't think we announced any dates yet for that, but I hope to be there. We will see how that will go. The next stop for me, or the next two stops for me, which I already know, is this week I will be in Frankfurt for the Digital Revolution Awards on a Friday evening. That will be a great event. I'm looking forward to that. But then the next conference I'm going to is going to be VMon, which is in Miami. Let me quickly pull up the date. 2023. I just looked. I think it's like in 2 weeks, so from now. So let me quickly check. Yeah, so it's May 22 to May 25 in Miami, Florida. So that's going to be a great conference. Veeam conferences are always very, very exciting. There's a lot of like interesting talks, a lot of interesting people, as you might have in other conferences too. But they always come up with some nice surprises and some new concepts in these at these conferences. So I'm really looking forward to meet a couple of people there. That's going to be the exciting place to looking forward to.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And if you spot Thomas, he has a wonderful, wonderful tips to share with you all. And he's a very wonderful person to hang out and talk about Azure, Kubernetes, Cloud Native, and all these kind of stuff. I really enjoy talking with him as well. So, Thomas, we will meet again. When we meet again, I believe we will meet again, might be after the Ignite, because that's a big event, I think, happening in November. So we will be catching up again. But thank you very much for your time on the today's podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation. I believe there are some stuff. There are people still need a lot of content, like a lot of the conversation around platform engineering. Do I able to solve the business problem, or do I love Kubernetes? So there are things coming up. So I believe this conversation really helped people a lot coming forward as well. And if you are in the Azure, Kubernetes, or these content, I will always go to the Thomas blog, read about it, and then I have enough information what is happening and what is there I need to focus in more, because it's not just technical community certification. I believe what should I call this website is, because you don't see any miss in there. You are, every time you go to this website, you find something really interesting. Thumbs up for the Thomas to putting so much energy in the website, having a job, having a baby, having all these kind of things, and still manage to pull up resources that are still number one resources on the internet. So thank you very much, Thomas. We will meet again. I really enjoyed the talking, and hope to see you again in the future. Best of luck with all of your things you're actually working on. And stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the talk. Remember, this is the first number. This is the only time Thomas and Isidora appear on a show, on a live podcast. And this will be happen again on the same show again in future. And it will let us know which topic you're interested in talking about. So bye bye, stay healthy and stay safe. We will meet again soon.